So Ready Player One is a book by a guy named Ernest Cline that came out back in 2012. And for the past 5 years, people have been telling me that I need to read this book, that reading this book is like having a long conversation with me. So with the film adaptation coming out, I figured I should finally just read the dang thing. And when I did, all I could think was one thing. Oh god, I hope this isn't how people feel when they talk to me. Ready Player One has a really great premise. A Matrix-style virtual world of pure escapism called the Oasis, where people live the way they do now, vicariously through pop culture creations. You can explore fantasy worlds from Dungeons & Dragons, drive the DeLorean from Back to the Future, or recreate famous dance scenes in zero-gravity nightclubs. Or do all of it, and more. Why not? On top of all that, there's a secret game built into the Oasis by its eccentric creator, a massive National Treasure Da Vinci Code-style treasure hunt. But instead of clues based on American history or art history, only the greatest scholars of pop culture history will make their way to the end and prove themselves to be the king of the geeks and inherit control of the Oasis, to make sure it never falls into the hands of the fake gamers. And there's endless material to be mined from that concept alone. If you think the Avengers is an exciting crossover event, just imagine a world where the Megazord can fight Voltron, or a Millennium Falcon that runs on dilithium crystals, or Pepsi Man with the Infinity Gauntlet versus Spot with all the lantern rings versus the Noid with the Dragon Balls. But the Oasis isn't just an opportunity to make baffling fan fiction come to life. Underlying the entire concept is an understanding that the appeal of this virtual world is that you can manufacture any identity that you want. No matter what you look like, no matter what your station is in life, your race, gender, all of it is negotiable here. And this is where the book starts to lose its footing, because Ready Player One really has nothing to say about why its fantasy world is the ultimate escapist fantasy for these characters, or why they even like the pop culture things that they like. And that may seem like a minor complaint, but it's actually massively problematic to the character development in this book. Like, here's an example. There's a scene up front where the main characters are hanging out, arguing about their favorite movies. One of them says they love the movie Lady Hawk. The other says Lady Hawk sucks. The first responds that Lady Hawk does not suck. It, in fact, rules. The other concludes that no, really, Lady Hawk sucks. That's our first big moment of character interaction and development that we get in the book. Now, notice a really big thing that's missing from that discussion? Why does the one character love the movie, and why does the other hate it? I finished the book, you can trust me, it's never explained. I couldn't care less that this guy likes Lady Hawk. What I do care about is what his love of Lady Hawk says about who he is as a character. What does he latch onto in the movie? Who does he relate to? What empowers him about it? This is the biggest problem with the book. The characters memorize movies, video game manuals, song lyrics, they build entire planets and avatars, and never in the entire story do we find out why. Because us, in the real world, when we put up a screenshot from a movie as our Twitter header, or decorate our rooms with Funko Pops, or post song lyrics as our Facebook statuses, or make alarmingly realistic recreations of the Jumanji board game or the Iron Man suit, it's because we found something personal reflected in the media around us. These things become totems, a shorthand to communicate some raw thing about ourselves that we're not sure how to communicate otherwise. And when you strip away the personal, emotional connections we form with pop culture, it's just a cycle of name-dropping movies from the Laserdisc era, and that gets real old real quick. And I say that being a guy who got all the references. I think there were like two names that got dropped where I had to stop and say, wait, do I know? I don't know who that is. And believe me, I'm not telling you this to brag or something. I'm saying this because, like, I don't want to get accused of, like, well, you don't get it. The stuff didn't relate to you. Like, no, I got everything. I am the intended audience for the book. And I'm saying that for me, it didn't work. That was not a suitable substitute because the characters are ciphers. We never really know who they are or even what their digital personas really are. Like, even to that extent, they're not very well developed. And this extends to the main character whose head we're in the whole time. His entire being is scrubbed of all personality, replacing it with tons of trivia and like a little bit of teenage angst for flavor. And I know the response to that. People say, well, no, the real appeal of the book is the treasure hunt. It's just a fun ride. And early on, yeah, it was fun. I love the idea of solving clues and chasing them all over the place. That's a solid premise to show off all the different corners of your world. But the challenges that the hero faces along the way are play a game of Joust, recite the movie War Games by memory, play a perfect game of Pac-Man, recite Monty Python and the Holy Grail by memory. And every single time the main character reacts to these challenges with, oh, good thing I'm already perfect at doing this. I'll solve it on my first try. Cool. This is what readers want. Protagonists who never face obstacles they can't immediately and effortlessly overcome. Like, there's literally a part where he has to play a perfect game of a perfect game of Pac-Man. And he says, only 20 people in history have ever done this, but I've never tried. And then he does it, and that's it. He wins. Sorry, spoiler alert, he's good at everything he does. I don't know what author could make a tense action sequence out of something like playing Pac-Man, but Ernest Cline, like, bless his heart, gives us like 6 of these things. It just doesn't work. And maybe there's a good opportunity for me to slip this in. I feel kind of like a jerk saying this, but the book's writing is just bad. There's like virtually no world building or like foreshadowing or anything, like, unless it's immediately relevant, which is just weird. It's like listening to a kid tell a story on the fly. There's a part where it literally is like, oh, by the way, I forgot to mention that for the past 6 months, me and my best friend, we got in a fight like half a year ago, and we haven't talked to each other since. Like, I forgot. I probably should have shown that scene. That seems important, but it's too late now. We're already this far in the book, so just pretend that you knew this the whole time. Like, stuff like that. Anyway, that's all I have to say about that. But the other thing people will tell me is, David, this book is not about the plot or the characters. The main character is the Oasis itself, this world of pure imagination. And I could probably accept that, except for one big, massive, unbelievable problem that I can't even believe. The Oasis is boring. The idea of the Oasis is great. There are potentially endless stories to be told in there. But real quick, I'm going to list a few of the places that we visit in this limitless world. A planet of nothing but schools. An empty dungeon. 2 planets of nothing but empty houses. An empty arcade planet. An uninhabited asteroid where our hero lives so he doesn't have to talk to people. A majority of the book is like this. It's surprisingly empty, with very few exceptions. And I don't necessarily think it's bad that the Oasis is mostly empty. The central theme of the book is that all of this media is potentially isolating. Like, the characters will occasionally throw out a line about how frivolous the Oasis is, or how the Oasis let them modify their appearance to bypass prejudices that other people have. And people who are obsessed with the Oasis are universally painted as kind of like sad or pathetic. And true community is only available when characters meet in real life. And the book ends with the big revelation that the Oasis can never replace the real world because the real world is the only thing that's real. But like those 5 sentences or whatever that I just told you, that's about as nuanced as the book gets. And I'm not saying the book has to be about those issues, but choose one. Like, either make your boundless dream world live up to its potential, or don't, and then actually use that to make a point. Like, do one of those things, please. The fact that very little time is spent analyzing what the Oasis actually means in the lives of the characters or larger society means the book isn't actually about anything. The characters are all one-dimensional, the plot is super straightforward, the world is barren, the themes are undercooked. So what are we here for then? The nostalgia, the references? And that's the most frustrating thing about reading this book. It has so much potential. The book clearly knows it has a story where it can discuss issues about geek culture and manufactured identity and addiction and artificial scarcity and climate change and a middle class that would rather ignore social issues than engage with them. But it has nothing to say about any of it except, how about that, huh? Sometimes people suck. Now let's get back to talking about all 50 seasons of Kamen Rider. So the book about why escapism is a trap ends up falling into the exact same trap it's warning us about. Reveling in the pop culture fantasy and not having time to address why the real world has more value than the digital one. And I don't need Ernest Cline to go into a whole diatribe about how the dystopian corporations in the book have these debtors' prisons that are a metaphor for the American prison system turning the poor into slaves or something like that. But I do need the characters to somehow acknowledge that their ability to revel in frivolous fantasy is coming at the cost of the real world, because That's ostensibly what everyone is supposed to learn at the end. This is their character arc. The way it's written right now, they never actually learn that lesson. They just play a bunch of 8-bit video games, recite dialogue from well-known movies, and then agree that, you know what, the real world is more important. Good night, everybody. And that is it's just not a satisfying story. But the potential that was there was so exciting to me, and knowing that Steven Spielberg was coming on to produce the movie adaptation of this, I was really excited to see this movie. So stay tuned for the next video that's coming out right after this, which will be a review of the movie itself. But I really felt like I had to get out of the way all of my opinions on the book, because I kind of don't know how to talk about the movie the way that I want to without laying all this stuff out first about the book. So this is part 1 in a 2-part series about Ready Player One. So don't touch that dial. More reviews of Ready Player One are coming up right after these messages.
See you next week. Same bat time, same bat station.
That was a reference.